Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So, the third book of the Sister Frevisse medieval mystery series, The Outlaw's Tale. Yes, those of you who know anything about Chaucer may have noticed the reference. This is, of course, one, because medieval stuff referencing Chaucer, always a good choice, but also because Frevisse is apparently Thomas Chaucer's niece. That is, the great man himself, the Chaucer who wrote Canterbury Tales, etc. Thomas Chaucer is his nephew or grandson or something to that effect. And so it's kind of a in the family reference thing. So, The Outlaw's Tale. In this book, Frevisse is getting to travel just a little. Basically, at the start of the book, we have Frevisse who is just enjoying being on the road, because as we learned in the last book, this was something that was very foundational to her and is one of the things she had to give up to become a nun, because she wanted to become one of those nuns who spends as much of their time as possible in quiet reflection on the majesty of God, not one of the service orders that lead peripatetic lifestyles catering to the poor, or rather taking care of the poor and leprous and scabrous and whatever else. And so given that Frevisse's choice means that, she's stuck where she is, this opportunity to go with Sister Emma to where one of Emma's siblings is having a christening for her child, and so Emma is going to this christening, and Frevisse is sort of enjoying traveling, but at the same time rapidly realizes that this is also going to be a torment, because it means she's going to be stuck with nobody but Sister Emma and their accompanying Master Nailer, who is basically there to provide a male escort to these two nuns so that they have, protection on the road and a man to do man stuff. And, so the problem with Sister Emma is that she's one of those people who never stops talking, one of those people who has read a book of Proverbs and then trots them out constantly as a desperate bid to demonstrate her great wisdom because she spent all of this time memorizing Proverbs. And Frevisse winds up, among other things, thinking rather darkly that there was probably a proverb that she could pull up about people who never stop talking, but she's going to try to live Christian values and not say that. And then they get basically kidnapped and carted off by a bunch of outlaws. Outlawry in England is an interesting thing because, of course, the only populist view of outlawry in England is Robin Hood. And the thing about being a wolf's head, being an outlaw, was that, of course, it was kind of like with pirates, where we all have the Jack Sparrow romanticized version of the pirate, but the fact is that pirates and outlaws were people who were not part of normal society. Most of them had very bad hygiene. They, couldn't come in from the rain. They didn't have the option of getting a job. They, had to do all kinds of stuff. And so when they get carted off by outlaws, there's a great deal of concern because, of course, you don't become an outlaw just for the fun of it. You become an outlaw because you have broken the law in some way and have made a run for, the woods that at one point covered England, because you're trying to avoid being arrested. There are ways to get out of it, but very often those ways are beyond the means, the physical capacity or the monetary means of said outlaw. So, when they arrive there, of course, Emma is freaking out, and Naylor and Frevisse are concerned, and it turns out that this band of outlaws is being led by Frevisse's own cousin. And Nicholas talks good game at Frevisse about how he's repents of what he did that got him made an outlaw, that he wants to get a pardon, and he talks good game and asks Frevisse to please write to Uncle Thomas and have him, because Uncle Thomas, for all that he is a non-noble person, he is extremely wealthy and very, very influential, and so he has the influence to convince somebody with the power to give pardons to, well, give pardons. And Frevisse lets herself be talked into it by her cousin, because he is charming, and he talks very good game about being repentant for what he did and saying, look, I just want to go home. I want to stop living in the woods. I want to stop being constantly rained on. As the book goes on, of course, we find out that a lot of that was just him hamming it up for Frevisse, and by the end of the book, he manages to get himself in trouble, but everybody else, at least in his little band, is probably going to get their pardons. Most importantly, the man Evan, who it turns out is kind of a nice guy, and there's a little love story which looks like it's actually going to have a happy ending, which is really, really nice as compared to that last book with that really, really horrific stuff that happened in the end of it, which was just horrible. Like, this is a murder mystery where the person being murdered, the first person who wound up murdered, was basically not a nice person. Nobody liked him. It's one of those, it is one of those moments where it's sort of like everybody says, well, he was probably killed by that guy, but we don't actually know because everybody wanted him dead. Those are always nice murder mysteries because, among other things, when the person who is murdered is somebody that nobody likes, as a reader, you don't have to sit there feeling bad about it the way you do if somebody is killed that everybody actually likes. Which is, very helpful for making things lighter in general. Frevisse has an interesting push-pull of duty and want and not want throughout this book, because she winds up doing a lot of things that are very, very hinky in terms of who she lies to and what she's doing, because there are several people who she decides to help because she thinks that they deserve that help, even if her helping them means that she's committing a great many sins. There is, in fact, a moment in the book where she thinks about how much time she's going to spend doing confession and making up for all of this stuff later. And there is, of course, an interesting exchange at the end of the book, because she does tell her Uncle Thomas about all of the stuff that she feels she did wrong, and he says, was it really pride? Because sure, there was a factor of this that would have been pride, because Frevisse does pride herself on being clever. She does put in a, yeoman's labor at trying to keep a lid on her ego. She really, really does. But at the same time, she's smart, and she knows she's smart, and so there is always that, slightly sharp bit with her that has to do with dealing with somebody who is particularly dumb. And my favorite scene of dealing with somebody who's particularly dumb is coming up in the next couple books. She does tend to get very cranky and sarcastic about a great many things. But the thing is that ultimately, she made an error because she fell for the story that Nicholas had woven her, that is, prodigal son, that he's made some mistakes and he's sorry and he wants to go home and he wants to be forgiven. And the hope of forgiveness is part of what drives one to join the church, not just for yourself in theory, but for others, the hope to pray for forgiveness for the whole world. That the whole point of going into the church has to do with the constant prayer, with praying to God to intercede on behalf of everybody. And her desire to see her cousin forgiven, to see all of these people who are outlaws forgiven, who, they're sorry for what they did, they've lived on the run, and they want to go back to leading ordinary lives. And so, stepping into that is a thing that she wants to do. And when she starts to protect this woman who is having a romance, not an affair, they're not sleeping together, they are a couple who have not slept together, they have been scrupulously honorable about everything, but they do want, the two of them do want to get married. And when she steps in to protect them because one of them, she, thinks he's a decent guy who just wants to, lead his life, and this woman who, she's a widow, she's married, she has done her duty of marrying because this is what you have to do for the family, and now as a widow she has her own property, she doesn't have to be beholden to anybody, because being a widow is one of the best things to be. Being a wealthy widow is one of the greatest things to be in European history, because being a widow means that, a reasonably well-off widow at least, it means that you have money, and that money is your money. It means that you remain respectable because you are not a woman who doesn't have a husband because she can't get one or has chosen not to have one. You are a woman who has suffered the unfortunate loss of her husband, and so you remain honorable. You are not under any obligation to get remarried because you have been married. You have done your job, so to speak, as a female person, and so you're actually free to do just about whatever you want. And so being a widow is a really, really great thing. It's actually one of the reasons why it's not so bad being a very young girl marrying an extremely old man, because that sure, he's awful and smelly, but you know what, he'll die and you'll still be young and you'll have all of his money and you'll get to be a wealthy widow, which means having lots of freedom. So there's a lot to be said for that, especially because, of course, once you've done that, it also means that now that you have married for money or position or whatever, you can now maybe decide that you're going to marry for something else. Anyways, and so this particular woman has decided, she married for that, and now she wants to marry Evan, because she likes Evan, because they've fallen in love. And one of the things that Frevisse appreciates looking at the two of them is that it seems very, very genuine. It's genuine, true, honorable love. It's not, two dumb people who have gotten caught up in lust or anything else. They seem to be two very, very genuine people who like each other as people. Anyway, so that particular thing seeming likely to work out is one of the nicest things about this book, that you have a lot of stuff in this book that actually, despite the things that don't work out, there's a bunch of stuff that does, which is really, really nice. So, I think that's everything that I've got to say on this, so I will see you all next week.